I think the most brutal thing, other than realizing the fact that a lot of life is kind of based on luck, based on, where you're born and who you're born to and your genetics and all that. And, it's pretty much a game of spin the wheel and see where the spinner stops. That oftentimes you can't really do that much to change this, especially not nowadays and probably not into the future, right? I'm not saying you can't change your life, but again, if you're kind of a loser or just a bottom feeder, as I like to put it, the shit you're born with is already pressing you down. Like, best case, you know, you can get a decent enough job and I guess earn enough money to support yourself, but you'll have enough money for copes and you'll live alone in a small apartment or small house, and that'll probably be the best of it. But obviously, with, things slowly falling apart and the American world order kind of turning inwards to eat itself, and typically that involves a reversion from, quote unquote democracy to authoritarianism. Um, life's not going to get any easier, right? Prices are going to increase, wages are going to keep stagnating, automation will definitely be used to replace as many jobs or parts of jobs as possible because, again, companies are greedy and they want their money. You can almost say that the West is kind of like Russia in many sense. In the 1990s, we were basically ruled by like robber capitalists, robber barons, the owners of the big mega corporations who have more money than everybody else and kind of lord it over us. And ironically, at times, they do a better job of, stuff that the nation is supposed to do than the nation itself, which is, if you're American, it's run by pedophiles, and if you're Canadian, it's influenced by those pedophiles, and if it's European, it's kind of got the boot of those pedophiles on it, the U.S. military and all that. And if we kind of, zoom into the micro scale, a lot of these, Chad Lights, Becky, Stacy's, Chad's, whatever, right? I guess you would call them high tier normies. Their lives are going to remain relatively insulated and unaffected until the economy actually collapses. Until there's hyperinflation, until there's genuine revolution, riots in the streets. So until the nation falls apart, which it will eventually, that's guaranteed. No nations last forever. These guys, in large part due to their luck, but also in large part, due to their own effort, let's give them some credit. Although it depends on the person, because some of them are just nepo babies, you know what I mean. They won't suffer. Or at the very least, it's a lot easier for them to plug the holes in their boat than it is for you. You just have to sit there and watch the water fill up to your knees, just be like, well, I gotta keep paddling because this is all I got. That just really highlights how unfair life is and just how uncaring it seems to be, like, just for everybody, just on a whole, Like, if you have a good face and, decent family with funding and, the lay of the land, you can get pretty far. That's most of my high school peers, right? If you don't have those things or you're missing one of them, then you're kind of screwed. And I mean, even then you can get fucked. Like, again, like Neil, right? He knows the boss of his company. He's got experience. He has decent folks, right? He has his skills. He looks pretty good and he's pretty athletic and fit and whatever, right? His family has connections to said boss. And, like, I don't know about now, but recently, right, for basically 4 months, he was laid off and couldn't get work. I mean, he technically had all the advantages over me, and he spent 4 months without work. I don't know if he's got work now. He probably does, but he had to wait, sit around for 4 months, just losing his mind and having no money. Of course, it's rarer, and I'm sure he's found a position for himself by now, so he's making moolah, as he likes to call it. Right? Kind of my example, right? These guys, it's a lot easier for them to fix their issues. Even if they get screwed over, which, let's be fair, it does happen. People aren't a monolith. And then there's us, You know, I was gonna make a video about the Russo-Ukraine war. I might make it later, maybe tomorrow, whatever. But like, it kind of proves that us people at the bottom of the pecking order, we're really just disposable, and no one really cares if we get hurt or die. A lot of these Russian troops going to Ukraine are contract soldiers. They're going there because they need money or they want money. Like this, the Kremlin is essentially telling them, hey, we're going to pay you a lot of bucks to, go out there and fight and get murdered by FPV drones. Right? Some of these guys are definitely desperate, right? There's even Africans, right? From unstable nations, shall we put it. They're serving in the Russian army as contract soldiers too, right? Because they need money. It's not about if you're Russian or African or Asian or whatever. Money, survival, desperation. Right? Some of these guys don't have shit. Right? A lot of former members who joined Wagner, right? They're basically, their outlook was either to be a security guard in like a mall or something, or, fight in Wagner and get big bucks. And who really gives a damn about them dying? So, right, same thing with the poor Ukrainian guys, just, the boys being dragged off the streets. A lot of them apparently are from East Ukraine, right, including old men, too. Not saying, some Ukrainians aren't patriots, but there are definitely Ukrainians who were forced to fight, right? And they're also getting blown apart by, Russian FPV drones and artillery and all the such. Right, who gives a fuck? No one cares. No one really cares. Yeah, maybe their families will, but on the grand scheme of things, everybody moves on. People stop giving a shit. And they're dead. The Russians are fertilizer for the Ukrainian homeland, and the Ukrainians are fertilizer for their own homeland. No one's going to remember them in 5 years. Maybe even one. People here, especially in the West, nobody gives a shit. Like, that's just how it is. These poor sods just happen to be born in Ukraine or born in Russia, and here's the war, and here's a bunch of money if you go fight, but you'll last like a week, and then a drone will find you and end you, and that's it. That's the end of your life. Right? Or if you want to look at the Middle East, right? All those little kids, right? They're stuck in essentially a failed state. They're trying to live their lives, or, making the most of what they have, and the next thing you know, a jet flies overhead and a bunch of bombs blow them to pieces. Sure, people cared, but the outrage lasted for like 5 minutes and everybody moved on. Welcome to the modern world, right? We see and hear and, I guess experience, in a sense, tragedy all the time, and eventually nobody gives a fuck anymore. Nothing will happen until this society burns to the ground from internal division and external pressure. And you better damn well know that our leaders, our wonderful leaders, who aren't really leaders, like I said, they're basically just robber barons, squeeze all the milk of the cow while it's still able to produce milk. They are going to exploit the fact that most of us will never act unless we are truly desperate and have no other outlet. And when everything falls down, they will use their mass resources, most likely to just stay in power or just take power again. Be like, hey, I have everything, so you better listen to me, kind of deal. And again, a lot of these people, they stay up there for long enough, it gets to their head. They think they're gods or something, and, so they want more and more control. The people up top take more and more from the people at the bottom, and the people at the bottom foolishly just decide we'll just work harder, or we'll just keep things as they are because I still have Netflix and video games and drugs and sex and vacations once a year. We're pretty much moving into the age of neo-feudalism, but some people are going to take some more time to become a serf than others. That's just how it is. Reality sucks, huh? Yeah, that's my little rant. In the end, we'll all get our justice, quote unquote, right? The people up top with the power, all the money, all the guns, whatever, at the end of the day, they will crush everybody. Yes, even if you're a Chad Light or Stacy or whatever, they will crush you too. it'll just take a lot longer for them to crush you, and you're going to be able to ride out your little free ticket to life, quote unquote, just a bit more than the rest of us. You got front row seats, we got no seats. That's reality.